Hello friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. For 23 years, I've been hauling crab pots off the Oregon coast. I started my working life at 17 as a deckhand on my uncle's boat in Astoria. This job wrecks your back and hands, but it gets under your skin. After a while, you stop feeling the cold. You stop feeling a lot of things. My boat is a 36-foot diesel trawler I bought from a guy in Newport in 2015. I named it Caroline after my daughter. It has reliable, sturdy engines and a good winch system. That's all you need here. The rest is just marketing. It was early November, about 3 years ago. I remember because Caroline had just turned 8 and I'd promised her I'd be back for her birthday party on Sunday. It was a Thursday morning when I left the dock. 4:30 a.m., same as always. The forecast called for light fog burning off by midday, seas 3 to 5 feet. Standard fall conditions. I was heading out to a spot about 19 miles northwest of Tillamook Head. It's not marked on any chart, just a rocky outcrop I found years ago where the Dungeness like to congregate. The GPS coordinates are saved in my phone and nowhere else. You don't share spots like that, not even with family. The fog that morning was thicker than the forecast suggested. Visibility, maybe 30 feet. I've navigated worse. The radar works fine, and I know these waters. The engine settled into its usual rhythm, that low diesel throb that you feel in your chest more than here. The only other sound was water against the hull and the occasional cry of a gull somewhere in the gray. I reached my spot around 6:15. The sun was technically up by then, but you couldn't tell through the fog. Everything was the same shade of nothing. I killed the engine and let the boat drift while I got my gear ready. The winch motor started on the first pull. Small blessing. My first pot came up normal. 7 keepers, 2 females I threw back. The second pot had 9. Good haul. I was thinking I might fill my quota early and actually make it back for Caroline's party. That's when I noticed something off about the third pot. The line was heavier than it should have been. Not stuck on the bottom heavy. Different. Like something was weighing it down beyond the pot itself. I've pulled thousands of pots. You develop a feel for the weight, the way it moves through the water. This felt wrong. The winch strained more than usual. I had to slow it down twice. When the pot finally broke the surface, I could see why. There was something tangled in the mesh. Something dark and organic looking wrapped around the frame. At first I thought it was kelp or a dead seal. We pull up dead animals sometimes, it's part of the job. But as the pot swung over the deck, I got a better look. It wasn't kelp, it wasn't a seal. It was shaped like a person, roughly person-sized anyway. But the proportions were wrong. The limbs too long, the torso too narrow, and the texture of it. Gray-white, mottled, slick with seawater. No clothing. No hair that I could see. Just skin, if you could call it that. I stood there with my hand still on the winch controls, not moving. The pot dripped seawater onto the deck. Inside the cage, the crabs were going crazy, climbing over each other, trying to get away from whatever was tangled on the outside. The smell hit me then. Not rot exactly, something else. Chemical, almost, but organic. Like iodine mixed with something sweet and wrong. It made my eyes water. I should have cut it loose right then. Looking back, that's what I should have done. Just cut the line and let the whole thing drop back into the ocean. But I didn't. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe. or stupidity. The two aren't that different. I lowered the pot onto the deck, moving slow, keeping the winch line taut. The thing didn't move, didn't make a sound. I circled around it, keeping my distance, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. The head, if it was a head, was wrong, elongated, no clear features I could identify as eyes or a mouth, just smooth expanses of that gray-white skin pulled tight over something underneath. The arms were too long, like I said. They ended in hands with too many fingers, thin as pencils, curled around the pot's mesh. I grabbed a gaff hook from the wall mount. My hands were shaking. I'm not ashamed to say it. I've seen a lot of strange things come up from the deep, but nothing like this. Nothing that looked almost human but fundamentally wasn't. I used the gaff to prod it. Just touched it lightly on what I thought was the shoulder. The skin was firm, not squishy like I expected, and cold. That doesn't mean much, I know. Everything that comes up from depth is cold. But this was different. This felt cold in a way that went beyond temperature. The moment I touched it, one of the fingers moved. Just a twitch, just the slightest curl of that too long digit. But it moved. This thing was alive. I dropped the gaff. It clattered on the deck, loud in the fog-muffled silence. I backed up until I hit the wheelhouse door. My heart was hammering. The thing didn't move again. The crabs in the pot were still frantic, piling on top of each other, their legs clicking against the metal frame. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes, just watching it, watching for any other sign of movement. There was nothing. Just that one finger twitch. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe it was just a muscle spasm, some post-mortem electrical discharge. That happens with fresh-caught fish sometimes. I needed to get rid of it. That much was clear, but I couldn't just throw it back. Not with my pot still attached. That was $100 pot. Plus the crabs inside were worth money. I'd have to cut it free first. I keep a good filleting knife in the wheelhouse. 6-inch blade, stays sharp. I retrieved it, along with a pair of heavy rubber gloves. I didn't want to touch that skin directly. The gloves were the thick kind we use for handling angry crabs. They'd have to do. I approached the pot again, knife in hand. Up close, I could see more details I hadn't noticed before. The skin wasn't entirely smooth. There were faint lines across it, regular patterns like scales, but not quite. And underneath, beneath that taut skin, I could see shapes, bones maybe, or something like bones. They moved when I shifted my angle, creating subtle shadows under the surface. The fingers were still wrapped around the mesh where the pot's frame met the netting. I decided to start there, cut the fingers free, then work on the rest. My hand was steady as I brought the knife to the first finger. I've gutted thousands of fish. This shouldn't be different. The knife touched the skin. The finger curled. Not a twitch this time, a deliberate movement. The finger curled away from the blade, wrapping tighter around the mesh. And then the others moved too. All of them, both hands, gripping the pot like they were trying to hold on. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a coil of rope. The knife fell from my hand. The thing still didn't make a sound. No cry, no hiss, nothing. Just that silent gripping motion. Those too many fingers tightening on the metal. And then, slowly, the head turned toward me. I'm not going to say it looked at me. It didn't have eyes, not that I could see. But the head oriented in my direction. I felt seen. I felt observed. My skin went cold despite the layers I was wearing. We stayed like that. Me pressed against the wheelhouse, it clinging to the pot. Both of us motionless. The fog pressed in closer. Visibility was down to maybe 15 feet now. The Caroline was completely isolated, floating in a bubble of gray nothing. I don't know how long we stayed frozen like that. Could have been 30 seconds. Could have been 5 minutes. Time went strange. Finally, I made myself move. Slow, careful, I reached behind me for the wheelhouse door. I was going to get inside, lock the door, and call the Coast Guard. Let them deal with it. This was beyond me. My hand found the door handle. I turned it, started to step backward through the door. That's when the thing moved. Not fast, not aggressive. It just relaxed its grip on the pot and began to pull itself free from the mesh. The movements were fluid, wrong, like watching something move underwater even though it was in open air. One of those long arms extended, the too many fingers spreading. I yanked myself into the wheelhouse and slammed the door. There's no lock on it, never needed one, but there's a latch. I flipped it closed. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely manage it. Through the salt-stained window, I watched the thing pull itself completely free from the pot. It moved across the deck in a way I can't properly describe. Not crawling, not walking. Something between. Its body bent in places that shouldn't bend. It reached the gunwale, the low railing that runs around the edge of the deck. For a moment, it paused there. That head turned back toward the wheelhouse. Toward me. Then it slipped over the side into the water. No splash. Just a smooth disappearance into the gray-green Pacific. I stood at the window for a long time, breathing hard, my breath fogging the glass. My radio was right there on the console. I should have grabbed it, made the call, but I didn't. I just stood there. Eventually, I made myself go back out on deck. The pot was still there, sitting in a puddle of seawater. The crabs calmer now. I looked over the gunwale where the thing had gone in. Nothing. Just fog and water. I checked the pot carefully before I dumped the crabs into my holding tank. No tears in the mesh beyond the normal wear, no evidence that anything unusual had been caught in it, except for the smell. That chemical-sweet iodine smell still lingered on the deck. I pulled my remaining pots. All normal. By the time I was done, the fog had started to lift like the forecast promised. The sun broke through in weak patches. Everything looked normal. Just another Thursday morning fishing the Oregon coast. I made it back to port by 2 in the afternoon. Good haul, all things considered. I sold my catch to the usual buyer. Nobody asked any questions. Nobody mentioned anything strange. I hosed down the Caroline, coiled my lines, did all my regular end-of-day work. I didn't tell anyone what I'd pulled up that morning. Not the buyer, not the harbor master, not the other fishermen on the dock. I thought about it. Stood there with my phone in my hand for 10 minutes, the Coast Guard's number pulled up on the screen. But I didn't call. What would I have said? I pulled up something that looked almost human but wasn't, and then it moved and went back in the water. They'd have thought I was drunk or losing it. And maybe I was. Maybe the fog and the isolation and the early morning were playing tricks on me. That's what I tried to tell myself. I made it home for Caroline's birthday party that Sunday. We had cake and presents and she was happy. Everything was normal. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I kept thinking about that thing, wondering if I really saw what I thought I saw. 3 weeks later, I was back in the same area. Same spot, more or less. I told myself I wasn't looking for anything specific, just fishing my regular grounds. But I was careful with each pot I pulled, watching, waiting to see if anything unusual came up with them. Nothing did. Everything was normal that trip and the trip after and the one after that. I started to relax. Started to think maybe it had been a one-time thing. Some weird, deep-sea creature that got caught by accident and found its way back home. These things happen. The ocean is full of animals we haven't cataloged yet. But then, about 2 months after that first incident, I was pulling pots in a different area, about 30 miles north of my usual grounds, following reports of good crab density from another fisherman I know. The first few pots came up normal. The fourth one came up heavy again. same feeling on the line, same wrong weight distribution. My stomach dropped before the pot even broke the surface. This time there were two of them tangled in the mesh, smaller than the first one, but otherwise identical. That same gray-white skin, those two long limbs, too many fingers. Both were still. Both were cold. But when the pot swung over the deck and I got close enough to see clearly, I noticed something that made my blood go cold. There were marks on them, wounds maybe. Or not wounds exactly. Tears in the skin that showed something underneath. Something that wasn't bone or muscle or anything I recognized. The edges of the tears were clean, almost surgical. And around the tears, that skin had changed texture, turned darker, rougher, like it was healing in a way that human skin doesn't heal. I cut the pot free this time, didn't hesitate. Used my knife to slash through the mesh, sacrificing the whole pot. Let it all drop back into the water, the pot, the crabs, and those two things tangled in it. Watched it sink into the dark green water until I couldn't see it anymore. Then I moved my boat a mile east and pulled my remaining pots from different coordinates. Nothing unusual in any of them. I finished my day, sold my catch, went home. That night I had dreams. Not nightmares exactly, just dreams of the ocean floor. Miles down, in the dark. Places where the pressure would crush a human body instantly. In the dreams, I could see things moving down there, pale shapes in the darkness, darting between underwater ridges and volcanic vents. Communities of them, maybe. Whole populations living in the deep where we never look. I've started avoiding that area now. That's the thing people don't understand about commercial fishing. We have our spots, our regular grounds, but there's thousands of square miles of ocean out there. You can work a whole career and only fish a tiny fraction of it. So I just moved my operations, stayed in shallower waters, closer to shore. My catch numbers went down a bit, but that's fine. I'm still making a living. Other fishermen have started mentioning strange hauls. Not to me specifically, just talk at the dock. The kind of casual conversation that happens when you're cleaning your boat or waiting for the buyer to show up. Someone pulled up a pot that was twisted out of shape. The metal bars bent like something incredibly strong had grabbed it. Another guy found all his crabs dead in a pot, but not dead from drowning or cold, dead from something else. Their shells cracked open from the inside. Nobody connects these incidents. Nobody suggests there's a pattern. That's not how we think. The ocean is dangerous and strange. Weird things happen. You note it, you adapt, you move on. You don't go looking for explanations because there usually aren't any that make sense. But I know. I've seen them. I know they're down there. I know they come up sometimes, into the shallower waters where we put our pots and run our lines. I don't know what they are, or where exactly they live, or what they want. I don't know if those marks I saw were from fighting or feeding, or something else entirely. What I do know is this: the ocean is deeper than most people realize. Even in areas we think of as shallow, even in the waters we fish every day, there are trenches and valleys and underwater canyons that drop down into darkness. There are places where the light doesn't reach, where the pressure turns water into something almost solid. And in those places things live. Things that sometimes get caught in our pots or tangled in our nets. Things that look almost human enough to make your brain struggle with what you're seeing, but are fundamentally something else. I still go out, still run my lines, still pull my pots. This is my job, my life. I can't just stop because I've seen something that scared me, but I'm more careful now about where I fish. I stick to the areas I know are shallow all the way down. I avoid the drop-offs and the deep channels. And when I pull up a pot that feels heavier than it should, When the line has that wrong resistance that I've learned to recognize, I don't fight it anymore. I just cut it loose, let it go. Some things aren't worth the cost of a pot or a day's catch. Caroline is 11 now. She wants to be a marine biologist. She talks about studying the ocean, discovering new species, exploring the deep sea. I encourage her. Tell her it's a good field, important work. And it is. But part of me hopes she chooses something else. Hopes she stays on land, in labs, looking at samples other people bring up from the depths. Because there are things down there we're not meant to see. Things that exist in a world so different from ours that even catching a glimpse of them feels wrong, feels like a violation of something fundamental. They have their space, their deep water darkness. And we should leave them there. Last week I was pulling pots about 15 miles off Cannon Beach. Good area, shallow water, regular grounds. Everything came up normal, but while I was working, I noticed something in the water about 50 feet off my starboard side. Just a pale shape beneath the surface, there for a moment and then gone. Could have been a harbor seal. Could have been a large fish. Could have been light playing tricks on the water. But I don't think it was any of those things. I didn't stop to investigate. Just finished pulling my pots, secured everything, and headed back to port. Normal day, normal catch, nothing to report. The Caroline's engine needs work. The winch motor is starting to act up. I've got a good spot where the rockfish are running heavy. Life goes on. The ocean keeps its secrets and I keep mine. But sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about those things I pulled up. I think about that smooth gray-white skin and those too many fingers. I think about the way they moved, fluid and wrong. And I think about how the ocean covers 70% of the planet, how most of it has never been explored, how there are entire ecosystems down there we know nothing about. I think about what else might be living in those depths. What else might occasionally swim up into the shallower waters where we work. What else we might pull up in our pots and nets someday. And I think about how lucky I am that the things I encountered just wanted to go back down into the dark. How lucky I am they didn't decide to hold on to the pot, didn't decide to climb aboard the Caroline, didn't decide that maybe they wanted to see what it's like up here in the light and the air. I'm 51 years old now. I've got another 15 years of fishing in me, maybe 20 if my back holds out. I'll keep going out, keep working these waters. It's what I know, it's who I am. But I'll remember. I'll always remember what's down there beneath us. Swimming in the deep. Waiting. The ocean keeps its secrets. And sometimes, for just a moment, it lets us glimpse them. I wish it hadn't. The thing about working a boat alone is that you start talking to yourself. Not crazy talk, just commentary. Narrating what you're doing, thinking out loud, filling the silence. After enough years, you don't even notice you're doing it anymore. I've been running my own operation out of Nia Bay for about 9 years now. Small outfit, just me and a 28-foot fiberglass hull I bought off a guy who was retiring. The boat's name is Persistence, which I thought was fitting. That's what this job takes more than anything else. Not skill, not luck, just the ability to keep going out day after day, even when the fish aren't running, even when the weather's bad, even when your body's telling you to quit. I do mostly salmon and halibut, depending on the season. It's not glamorous work. The tourist boats that run out of Seattle, those are clean and pretty with nice paint jobs and tourists taking pictures. My boat smells like fish guts and diesel. The deck is stained from years of blood and bait. The cabin's cramped and the heater barely works. But she's mine, paid off, and she gets me where I need to go. It was mid-March when it happened. I remember because I was thinking about my property taxes that were due at the end of the month. wondering if I'd have enough from the early season catches to cover them without dipping into savings. Money's always tight in this business. One bad season and you're done. I'd left the harbor at 5 a.m., which was later than I usually go, but I'd stayed up late the night before going over my accounts. The sky was just starting to lighten when I cleared the breakwater. No fog that morning, which was unusual. Just clear, cold air and a sky that was more purple than blue. I was heading to a spot about 23 miles northwest. It's not a secret spot exactly, but it's far enough out that most of the smaller boats don't bother. The fuel cost alone keeps a lot of people away. But I've had good luck there over the years, and with the taxes looming, I needed a good day. The water was calm. Almost too calm. That flat, glassy surface that feels unnatural somehow, like the ocean is holding its breath. No chop at all, just a long, slow swell that barely rocked the boat. I could see the Olympics behind me, still snow-capped, looking close even though they were miles away. I reached my coordinates around 6:45. The sun was fully up by then, sitting low on the horizon, turning the water orange where it hit. I killed the engine and started setting up my lines. I was using cut herring for bait, which I'd prepared the night before. The smell of it always makes me nauseous on an empty stomach, but you get used to it. I got 4 lines in the water, each with a different weight to fish different depths. Then I started the slow troll, letting the boat drift with the current while I watched my rods. This is the boring part of fishing that people don't understand. It's not exciting, it's just waiting, watching the tips of your rods for any sign of movement, drinking coffee that's gone cold, thinking about nothing and everything. About an hour passed with nothing. I was starting to consider moving to a different spot when my deepest line went tight. The rod bent hard, the kind of bend that means you've got something substantial. My heart rate kicked up. This is what you wait for, that moment when the monotony breaks. I grabbed the rod out of its holder and started working the fish. Whatever it was had weight to it. Good weight. It pulled hard, making the line scream out. Could be a big halibut, maybe a lingcod. Hard to tell until you get it closer. I worked it for about 10 minutes, gaining line slowly, feeling the fish tire. When I finally got it close enough to the surface to see, my first thought was relief. It was a halibut, a good-sized one, maybe 40 pounds. That would help with the taxes for sure. I grabbed my gaff and leaned over the gunnel, ready to hook it and haul it aboard. That's when I saw there was something in its mouth. Not the hook, something else. The halibut's jaw was stretched wide, much wider than it should be, and there was something lodged in there, something dark and angular. My first thought was that it had tried to eat something too big and choked on it. You see that sometimes with fish. Their eyes are bigger than their stomachs. I gaffed the halibut and pulled it up onto the deck. It was still alive, thrashing weakly, but something was wrong with how it moved. Jerky, uncoordinated, like its nervous system wasn't working right. I put it out of its misery with my priest, a quick blow behind the eyes, standard procedure. Then I got a closer look at what was in its mouth. It was made of metal. Dark, corroded metal, but clearly manufactured. Some kind of device or tool, I couldn't tell what. Roughly cylindrical, about the size of a beer can, with strange protrusions on one end. Symbols or markings etched into the surface, worn almost smooth but still visible. The halibut's jaw was torn where this thing had been lodged. Not torn like it had swallowed something sharp. Torn like the object had forced its way in, like something had pushed it into the fish's mouth from the outside. I used my pliers to work it free, being careful not to cut myself on any sharp edges. The metal was cold, colder than it should be after being inside a fish, and heavy, much heavier than it looked. I set it on the deck and it made a solid thunk against the fiberglass. I stood there looking at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. You pull up trash sometimes. Bottles, cans, pieces of rope, all kinds of human garbage that ends up in the ocean. But this wasn't trash. This was something else. Something manufactured with purpose, even if I couldn't figure out what that purpose was. The markings on it weren't any language I recognized. Not letters or numbers. Just symbols. Geometric patterns that repeated in sequence around the cylinder. They looked old, really old. The kind of old where you can't tell anymore if something was made 100 years ago or 1,000. I picked it up again, turning it over in my hands. One end had what looked like an opening, a circular hole about the diameter of my thumb. I held it up to the light, trying to see inside, but it was too dark. Could have been hollow, could have been filled with something. No way to tell without better equipment. That's when I noticed my hands were tingling. Not painfully, just a strange pins and needles sensation where I was touching the metal. I set it down quickly, flexed my fingers. The tingling faded after a few seconds. Probably just my hands being cold, I told myself. Or maybe some kind of barnacle toxin on the metal. I decided to set it aside and keep fishing. I'd pulled up weird stuff before. A few years back, I found an old anchor that must have been 50 years old, completely encrusted with marine growth. Another time, I snagged what turned out to be part of a World War II-era life raft. The ocean floor is a graveyard of lost things. This was just another piece of debris. I baited my hook again and got my line back in the water. But I kept glancing at that metal cylinder sitting on my deck. It bothered me in a way I couldn't articulate. Not scared, exactly, just unsettled. Like finding someone else's keys in your pocket and not remembering how they got there. About 20 minutes later, my shallow line hit another halibut, smaller than the first, maybe 25 pounds. I worked it up, gaffed it, brought it aboard. Same thing. Something in its mouth. Not the same object, but similar. Another piece of that dark, corroded metal, this one more elongated with different markings. My stomach went tight. Once is strange, twice is a pattern. I pulled it free from the fish's torn jaw and set it next to the first one. They didn't look like they fit together exactly, but they were clearly related. Same metal, same style of markings, same impossible coldness. I stopped fishing. Stood there on the deck of my boat looking at these two objects, trying to think. The rational part of my brain was looking for explanations. Maybe there was a shipwreck nearby, something old, and these were pieces of whatever cargo it had been carrying. Maybe there was a current that was stirring up the bottom, exposing things that had been buried for years. But that didn't explain why they were in the fish. That didn't explain the torn jaws, the way the metal seemed to have been forced inside. I pulled up my remaining lines, started the engine. I should have headed back to port, I know that. Should have taken these things to someone who could identify them. A marine archaeologist, maybe, or a museum. But I didn't. Instead, I started a search pattern around my current location, trolling in wider and wider circles. I needed to know if there were more. Over the next 2 hours, I caught 6 more fish. 4 halibut and 2 large rockfish. Every single one had a piece of that metal inside it. Every single jaw was torn the same way. By the time I stopped, I had 11 pieces laid out on my deck, arranged in a row. They were all different, but they shared common elements. The same dark metal, the same style of markings, various sizes and shapes from the size of my thumb to one that was nearly a foot long. Some cylindrical, some angular, some with smooth surfaces, and some with textures I couldn't identify. I tried to fit them together, thinking maybe they were pieces of a larger object that had broken apart, but they didn't connect. Or if they did, I couldn't figure out how. Every configuration I tried felt wrong. like I was missing some key piece of information about how they were supposed to relate to each other. The tingling in my hands was worse now. Not just tingling anymore. A kind of vibration, deep in my bones. And I was starting to feel it in my teeth, too, like I was touching a battery with my tongue. I put on my work gloves, the heavy rubber ones, but I could still feel it through the material. I checked my watch. It was almost noon. I'd been out here for 6 hours. The sun was directly overhead now, reflecting off that glassy water, making everything too bright. I had a headache building behind my eyes. That's when I noticed the fish. There were dozens of them near my boat, just beneath the surface, barely visible. Halibut, rockfish, lingcod, all swimming in a slow circle around the persistence. Not feeding. Not doing anything that fish normally do. Just circling. Their movements were synchronized in a way that felt unnatural. I watched them for several minutes. They didn't break the surface, didn't react to my presence, just kept circling, like they were waiting for something. I made a decision then that I still don't fully understand. I picked up one of the metal pieces, the smallest one, and threw it overboard. It sank quickly, disappearing into the dark water. The fish immediately converged on where it went down, not fighting over it, not trying to eat it. They just gathered there, hovering in the water, and then slowly dispersed. Within 5 minutes, they were gone. All of them. The water was empty again. I threw the rest of the pieces overboard, one by one. Each time, fish would appear and gather where the metal sank, then drift away. By the time I threw the last piece, my hands were shaking. The vibration feeling had spread up my arms, into my chest. It felt like every cell in my body was oscillating at a frequency just slightly wrong. I started the engine and headed back toward port. The headache was worse now, a pressure behind my eyes that made it hard to focus. I kept checking my instruments to make sure I was on course. The GPS showed me heading northeast back toward Nia Bay, but the compass was spinning, just slowly rotating, never settling on a direction. I've seen compasses go bad before. It happens. Magnetic interference from the engine, or a faulty instrument. But watching that needle turn, unable to find north, made my skin crawl. The trip back should have taken about 90 minutes. It took almost 3 hours. I kept getting turned around, even with the GPS. Kept finding myself heading in directions I didn't intend to go. My sense of where I was felt scrambled, like my internal map had been erased. When I finally made it back to the harbor, the sun was low on the horizon. Late afternoon, almost evening. I must have lost time somewhere, but I couldn't account for where. The harbor master waved to me as I came in, normal greeting. I tied up at my usual slip, secured everything, went through my normal routine. The fish I'd caught were still in my hold. 11 fish, all with torn jaws. But when I went to clean them, to prepare them for sale, I couldn't find any evidence of the damage I'd seen earlier. Their mouths were fine, normal, no tears, no wounds, like nothing had ever been lodged inside. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Stress, maybe, or dehydration, or carbon monoxide from the engine. The human brain can create vivid hallucinations when it's deprived of oxygen. Maybe that's all it was. But my hand still had that tingling sensation. And my compass was still broken, the needle slowly spinning, never pointing north. I sold my catch to the usual buyer, got a decent price, went home, made dinner, everything normal. But that night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those symbols, the geometric patterns etched into the dark metal. They moved behind my eyelids, shifting and recombining like my brain was trying to decode them. 3 days later, I went back out. Different area this time, about 15 miles south of where I'd been before. I told myself I was just fishing, just doing my job. but I was looking, watching every fish I caught, checking their mouths, looking for more of those metal pieces. I didn't find any. Everything was normal. Good catches, no anomalies. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt disappointed, like I'd missed something important, let something slip away before I could understand it. Over the next few weeks, I asked around. Casual questions to other fishermen at the dock. Had anyone pulled up anything strange lately? Any weird metal objects or damaged fish? Nobody had. Or, if they had, they weren't talking about it. You learn to keep things to yourself in this business. You don't want people thinking you're crazy or trying to claim your spots. But I noticed things. Small things. The way some of the other fishermen would touch their hands together absently, like they were trying to get rid of a sensation they couldn't quite describe. The way certain areas of water were being avoided without anyone explicitly saying why. Conversations that stopped when I approached. Maybe I wasn't the only one who'd pulled up something strange. Maybe this was happening to others too, and we were all just keeping quiet about it, protecting ourselves from looking foolish or unstable. My compass never fixed itself. I bought a new one, but within a week it started doing the same thing, slowly spinning, unable to find north. I navigate by GPS now. It works fine, but I don't trust it the same way. Electronics can be fooled. Satellites can be wrong. A compass is supposed to be simple, reliable. When it stops working, it feels like a betrayal of something fundamental. I still fish those waters, still pull up halibut and salmon and rockfish, everything normal. But sometimes, when I'm out there alone in the early morning, when the water is that unnatural glassy calm, I think about those metal pieces, where they came from, what they were for, why they were inside the fish. And I think about the patterns, the symbols etched into their surfaces. I've tried to draw them from memory, late at night when I can't sleep, but I can never get them right. They slip away from my pen, refusing to be captured on paper, like trying to remember a dream after you've woken up. You know you saw something important, but the details won't stay solid. I looked into shipwrecks in the area. There's dozens of them, going back over a century. Cargo ships, fishing boats, even a couple of World War II vessels that went down during patrol runs. But none of them were carrying anything that matched what I found. Or, if they were, there's no record of it. There's a lot of water out here. A lot of ocean floor we've never mapped, never explored. The Pacific is deep in ways that are hard to conceptualize. You can know intellectually that parts of it drop down 6 miles, but actually, understanding what that means, what exists in those depths, that's different. Things sink into the deep, and they stay there. Preserved in the cold and the pressure and the darkness. Waiting. Sometimes the currents change, or the seabed shifts, and things that were buried get uncovered. Sometimes they find their way into shallower water, into our nets and on our hooks. I caught a halibut yesterday. Big one, maybe 50 pounds. When I pulled it up and gaffed it, just for a moment before I brought it aboard, I thought I saw something in its mouth. That dark glint of metal, those geometric edges. But when I got it on the deck and checked, there was nothing. Just a fish with a hook in its lip and the normal amount of terror in its eyes before I killed it. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe my brain is filling in details that aren't there, creating patterns where there's only randomness. That's what I tell myself. But my hands still tingle sometimes. Not all the time. Just occasionally, usually when I'm handling fish that came from deeper water. And I still can't find north with a compass. 4 different compasses now, all doing the same slow spin. The ocean is full of things we don't understand. Old things, strange things, things that don't fit into our categories of what should exist and what shouldn't. Most of the time, they stay hidden. stay down in the deep where we can't see them. But sometimes something shifts. Some current changes or some balance tips, and for just a moment we get a glimpse. We pull up something that shouldn't be there, something that makes us question what we think we know, and then it's gone, sunk back into the depths, leaving nothing but questions and that feeling in your hands, that vibration in your bones that tells you something touched you, something from down there in the dark, something that maybe wanted to be found, or maybe was warning you to stay away. I don't know which. I'm still fishing, still going out every morning, weather permitting, still pulling up fish and selling my catch and paying my bills. Normal life, normal work. But I'm more careful now about where I fish. I avoid the deepest waters, stick to the areas I know stay shallow, where the bottom is rock and sand and nothing else. Because there are things down there we're not meant to find. Things that have been sitting in the dark for longer than we can imagine. Things that maybe we disturbed by accident, or maybe that are starting to rise on their own. And if they're rising, if they're finding their way into shallower water, into the mouths of fish we catch and eat, then maybe we're already closer to them than we realize. Maybe they're already here, in the water we fish, in the food we pull from the ocean. Maybe they've been here all along, and we just never noticed. I think about that sometimes, late at night. I think about those symbols, those patterns I can't quite remember or recreate. And I wonder what they meant, what they were trying to say. But mostly, I try not to think about it at all, because thinking about it doesn't change anything. The ocean is still there. The fish are still there. And whatever those metal pieces were, wherever they came from, they're gone now. Back in the deep. Back where they belong. At least, that's what I tell myself. My taxes got paid. The season's been decent. Life goes on. But my compass still spins, and my hands still remember that cold. I keep a logbook, always have. Not for the Coast Guard or taxes or anything official, just for myself. Date, time, location, weather conditions, catch numbers. Sometimes I'll add a note about something I saw. A pod of orcas, unusual bird activity, water temperature anomalies. Little details that might be useful later, or might just be interesting to look back on. I've got notebooks going back to 2009 when I first started working these waters. They're stacked in a milk crate in my garage, pages stained with salt water and fish blood, the ink faded in places. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I'll flip through the old ones, remembering trips, remembering weather, remembering what the fishing was like in different years. There's one entry I keep coming back to. October 17th, 3 years ago. I didn't write much, just the basics, and at the bottom, underlined twice. Don't go back there, that's it, no explanation, no details, just those 4 words. The thing is, I don't remember writing it. I remember the trip, or parts of it anyway. But I don't remember sitting down afterward and making that entry. And I don't remember what happened that made me write those words. My name's Owen. I'm 43 years old. I've been commercial fishing out of Port Angeles for 14 years, ever since I got laid off from the lumber mill and needed work. Started as deckhand on other people's boats, learned the trade, saved my money, bought my own rig 5 years ago, a 30-footer called the Maggie Grace after my grandmother. The work suits me. I'm not much of a people person. Never have been. Out on the water, you don't have to make small talk or pretend to be interested in things you're not. It's just you and the ocean and the job. Simple. Clean. I like that. October 17th was a Friday. I remember because I'd planned to have the weekend off, maybe drive down to Seattle to visit my sister. But the forecast for Friday was perfect, and the forecast for Monday looked rough. So I decided to go out, make the Seattle trip another time. I left early, still dark. The parking lot at the marina was empty except for my truck and one other vehicle I didn't recognize. I loaded my gear onto the Maggie Grace, fired up the engine, let it warm while I checked my equipment. Everything normal. The water was smooth, leaving the harbor. No wind. The sky was clear enough to see stars, which would fade as the sun came up. I had coffee in a thermos and a sandwich my neighbor had made me the night before. Egg salad. I remember the smell of it in the cabin, mayonnaise and paprika. I was heading west, out past Freshwater Bay to a spot I'd been hitting pretty regularly that season. Good concentration of black cod, which were fetching decent prices. The run was about an hour and 20 minutes at cruising speed. I'd timed it so I'd arrive right around dawn, when the fishing tends to be best. About 40 minutes in, I noticed the stars were gone. Not because the sun was coming up. It was still too early for that. They were just gone, covered by cloud cover that had moved in without me noticing. Thick clouds, low hanging. The kind that turned the sky into a solid ceiling of gray. The wind picked up a little. Nothing serious. Maybe 10 knots. The water started to show some texture, small waves catching what little light there was. I adjusted my course slightly to take the chop at a better angle. Still normal, still a good day for fishing. That's when my electronics went strange. The GPS screen flickered. Just for a second, then came back. The numbers were right, my course was right, but something about it looked off. I couldn't put my finger on what exactly. The depth finder started showing inconsistent readings, jumping from 180 feet to 340 feet to 90 feet, all within the span of a few seconds. But I knew these waters. I knew the bottom here was relatively flat, around 200 feet. The instrument was malfunctioning. I've had equipment failures before. It happens. Electronics don't like salt water and moisture. I switched the depth finder off and back on. It settled down to a steady 195 feet. Close enough. The GPS was still acting normal, mostly. Just that slight off feeling that I couldn't identify. I reached my spot around 6:40. The sky was lighter now, that pre-dawn gray that's not quite day and not quite night. I could see maybe a quarter mile in any direction. Just water and more water, no other boats visible. I liked fishing spots where you didn't have to worry about traffic. I set up my long line, baited hooks, checked the weights, got everything ready. The work was automatic after years of doing it. My hands knew the movements without my brain having to direct them. Tie the knot, attach the hook, check the spacing. Over and over. Meditative almost. I had the line in the water by 7. Then came the waiting. I kept the boat in a slow drift, monitoring the line, drinking coffee that had gone lukewarm. The clouds had gotten lower. I could feel them pressing down, making the space between water and sky feel compressed. Claustrophobic. Around 7:30, I started pulling the line up to check it. Sometimes you can tell within the first hour if you're in a good spot or if you need to move. I worked the winch, bringing up the line hand over hand, checking each hook as it came aboard. The first 6 hooks were empty. The bait was gone, but nothing had been caught. Typical, you lose more bait than you catch fish, especially early in the day. The 7th hook had something. I could feel the weight on the line before I even saw it. Good, solid weight. I worked it up carefully, not wanting to lose whatever it was. When it broke the surface, I saw it was a black cod. Nice size, maybe 7 or 8 pounds. But there was something wrong with it. The way it hung on the hook was wrong. Too limp, too still. Fish usually thrash, even when they're dying. This one was just hanging there. I brought it aboard and grabbed it to remove the hook. The skin felt wrong under my gloves. Too soft. Like the flesh underneath had somehow turned to mush. When I squeezed slightly, my fingers sank into the body further than they should have. I've handled thousands of fish. I know what they're supposed to feel like. This was wrong. I got the hook out and dropped the fish into my holding bin, planning to look at it more carefully later. Maybe it had been dead for a while before it took the hook. That happens sometimes. The next 3 hooks were empty. Then another fish. Same thing. Wrong texture, wrong weight, wrong everything. I started to feel uneasy, though I couldn't have said exactly why. Just a feeling in my gut that something was off. By the time I'd pulled up the entire line, I'd caught 11 fish. Every single one had that same strange quality. Soft. Too soft. Like something had happened to them beneath the surface, some change in their tissue structure. I stood on the deck looking at them in the holding bin. They were definitely black cod. Right size, right coloring, right shape. But something was fundamentally wrong. I picked one up again, felt its weight in my hands. It almost seemed to sag, like it was having trouble maintaining its form. That's when I noticed the smell. Not the normal fish smell. Something else underneath it. Sweet and chemical at the same time. Faint, but distinct. It reminded me of something, but I couldn't place what. Something from a long time ago. A memory that wouldn't quite surface. I decided to move. Maybe there was something in the water here. Some algae bloom or chemical spill that was affecting the fish. I'd heard of things like that happening. Environmental contamination causing die-offs or mutations. Better to find cleaner water. I pulled up anchor and started the engine, headed north about 2 miles to a secondary spot I sometimes used. The clouds were even lower now. Visibility was down to maybe 100 yards. The water had gone completely flat again, that unnatural smoothness that always makes me uncomfortable. I reset my line at the new location, same process as before. While I waited for the hooks to sink and the fish to hopefully find them, I examined one of the strange cod more carefully. I laid it out on my cleaning board and made a cut along its belly to gut it. The knife went through too easily. Way too easily. The flesh parted like pudding, offering almost no resistance, and inside, everything was wrong. The organs weren't where they should be. Or rather, they were there, but they'd turned into something else. A kind of gray-brown slurry that oozed out of the body cavity. I've gutted fish in all states of decay. I've seen fish that sat in the sun too long, fish that died in the net and started rotting before I could get them on ice. This wasn't decay. This was something else. The fish had been alive when I caught it, or at least recently alive. But something had liquefied its insides while leaving the outside mostly intact. I threw it overboard, watched it sink into the dark water. Then I threw the rest of them over too, all 11 fish. I didn't want them on my boat anymore, didn't want to touch them or smell them or look at them. I washed down the holding bin with seawater, scrubbed the cleaning board, got rid of every trace of those fish. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was just the cold, but I knew it wasn't. I gave my line about an hour at the new location. When I started pulling it up, I had the same results. Soft fish. Wrong fish. Fish that felt like they were dissolving from the inside out. I threw them all back without even bringing most of them fully aboard. Just cut the line near the hook and let them drop. I moved again, and again. 4 different locations over the next 3 hours. Every spot was the same. Every fish I caught had that quality, that wrongness, like something in the water was changing them, breaking them down at a molecular level. By 11 a.m., I was done. I hadn't kept a single fish. I pulled up my line for the last time, secured it, started heading back toward the port. I just wanted off the water. wanted to be on solid ground where things made sense. That's when the engine died. Just cut out. No sputtering, no warning signs. 1 second it was running fine, the next it was silent. I tried to restart it, nothing, not even a clicking sound. The battery was dead, completely drained, but that was impossible. I'd had it tested 2 weeks before, it was fine, and even if the battery was dying, I should have noticed signs. The engine should have struggled before it quit entirely. This was instantaneous. I tried again. And again, nothing. The Maggie Grace was dead in the water, drifting with the current. I got on the radio to call for assistance. The radio was dead too. No power. I checked the breakers. All fine. Checked the connections. All solid. Everything should have been working, but nothing was. My phone was in the cabin. I grabbed it to call the Coast Guard. No signal. I had full bars when I left port, but now there was nothing. Not even a searching for signal message. Just a blank display where the signal strength should be. I was starting to panic, really panic. Not just unease anymore. My heart was racing, my breath coming too fast. I forced myself to slow down, to think. I had emergency flares. I had a backup handheld radio. I had options. But when I tried the backup radio, it was dead too. Brand new batteries, and it wouldn't even turn on. The flares were fine, but flares only work if someone's close enough to see them. In this visibility, in this empty stretch of water, they'd be useless. I was alone, completely alone. Drifting in fog so thick I could barely see the bow of my own boat. No engine, no radio, no way to call for help. The only sounds were the lap of water against the hull and my own breathing. I don't know how long I sat there in the cabin. Could have been 20 minutes. Could have been an hour. Time felt strange, elastic. I kept checking my watch, but the numbers didn't seem to change at the rate they should. And then I heard it. A sound from outside, from the water. Not a splash, not a wave. Something else. A kind of low vibration, felt more than heard. It came from beneath the boat, resonating through the hull. A thrumming sensation that made my teeth ache. I went out on deck, looked over the side. The water was darker than it should be, not just deep water dark. A different kind of dark. Like something in it was absorbing light, pulling it down into the depths. The sound continued. Pulse after pulse. Regular, deliberate. Not random ocean noise. Something with purpose. Something that was communicating or calling or announcing itself. I watched the water. Saw movement beneath the surface. Not fish. Too big to be fish. Shapes that were there and then not there. Visible for just a moment before disappearing into that unnatural darkness. The boat started to turn. Slowly, without wind or current to explain it. Just rotating in place, pulled by something underneath. I grabbed the gunwale, held on, watching the water churn slightly around the hull. Then it stopped. The sound, the movement, everything. Absolute silence. Absolute stillness. The fog pressed in closer. I couldn't see more than 10 feet now. Couldn't see my own bow. Something bumped the boat from underneath. Gentle. Almost careful. Then again, harder. The Maggie Grace rocked. I stumbled, caught myself. Another bump, and another. Not aggressive. More like something was investigating. Feeling the hull. Learning its shape. I stood frozen on the deck. Every instinct screaming at me to do something, but there was nothing to do. Nowhere to go. No way to escape. I was 30 feet of fiberglass in the middle of the Pacific with something large circling underneath. The bumping stopped. The water went still again. I waited. 1 minute, 2, 5, nothing. Then the engine started, just fired up on its own. No key turned, no starter engaged. It just came to life, settling into its normal idle. The GPS screen flickered back on. The radio crackled with static. My phone showed full bars again. Everything worked. Everything was fine. Like nothing had ever been wrong. I didn't question it, didn't try to figure it out. I just gunned the throttle and headed for port as fast as the Maggie Grace could go. The fog thinned as I went, visibility improving every minute. By the time I was halfway back, it was a clear October day, sun shining, water sparkling. Perfect conditions. I pulled into my slip around 3 in the afternoon. Everything normal. Other boats coming and going, people working on the docks. The harbor master waved, I waved back. Normal day, normal return. I secured my boat, unloaded my gear, went through my usual routine. But my hands were still shaking. My heart was still beating too fast. I felt like I'd run a marathon even though I'd been sitting in a boat all day. That night, I made my logbook entry. Date, time, location, weather. Catch, 0. And at the bottom, those words I don't remember writing, don't go back there. The next day was Saturday. I didn't go to Seattle. Couldn't bring myself to drive that far. I just stayed home, sat on my couch, tried to watch TV. Couldn't focus. Kept thinking about those fish. That sound. That darkness in the water. On Monday, I went out again. Different area, much closer to port. Everything was normal. Caught good fish, healthy fish, fish that felt right. Made decent money, kept fishing all week. All normal. But I never went back to that spot. Never went anywhere near it. I marked it in my GPS with a waypoint labeled Avoid. When I'm planning my routes, I make sure to give it a wide berth. At least 5 miles. Maybe more. Other fishermen work that area. I see them sometimes on the charts, see their boats on the AIS display. They seem fine. They catch fish. They go home. Nothing happens to them, as far as I know. Maybe whatever was there that day is gone now. Maybe it was just passing through. Maybe it only appears under certain conditions, certain combinations of weather and tide and moon phase that haven't lined up again since. Or maybe it's still there. Maybe it's always there. And maybe some of us can sense it and some can't. Maybe I just happened to be tuned to the right frequency that day, the way sometimes you pick up a distant radio station perfectly clear and then never find it again. I still fish these waters, still make my living pulling food from the ocean, but I'm more careful now. I pay attention to feelings I used to ignore. When something feels wrong, I move. I don't push it, I don't investigate, I just go somewhere else, because there are places in the ocean that aren't meant for us. Places that belong to things that were here long before humans started building boats and dropping hooks. Places where the rules are different, where our technology doesn't work, where fish dissolve from the inside out and engines die for no reason. And if you're smart, if you value your life and your sanity, you learn to recognize those places and you stay away. I've been fishing long enough to know that the ocean tolerates us. It lets us take from it, lets us float on its surface, lets us pretend we understand it. But we don't understand it at all. We're visitors in a world that's not ours, taking resources from an environment that could kill us in 100 different ways. Most of the time, it chooses not to. Most of the time, we're allowed to do our work and go home safe. But there are moments, rare moments, when the ocean reminds us. When it shows us that we're not in control, that we never were. That day was one of those moments. 3 years ago now, but I remember it like it was yesterday. Remember those soft fish, that darkness in the water, that sound vibrating through the hull, the feeling of being observed by something vast and ancient and completely indifferent to my existence. I still have nightmares sometimes. I'm back on the Maggie Grace, drifting in that fog. Engine dead. That sound starting up beneath me. But in the dreams, I don't make it home. In the dreams, something comes aboard. Something that learned the shape of my boat by bumping against it, that figured out the dimensions and the weight and decided it wanted a closer look. I wake up in a cold sweat, heart pounding, checking to make sure I'm in my bed and not on the water. It takes a few minutes for the fear to fade, for my rational brain to remind me that I made it back, that whatever was there let me go. But why did it let me go? That's the question I can't answer. What did I do right? Or what did I do wrong that made it decide I wasn't worth keeping? I don't know. I'll never know. And maybe that's worse than any answer I could have gotten. My logbook sits in my garage. Dozens of notebooks full of trips and catches and weather observations. Only one entry that tells me not to return to a location. Only one day that I can't fully remember, where my memory has holes like something reached in and pulled pieces out. I keep fishing, keep going out, keep doing my job. Because what else am I going to do? This is my life. This is how I survive. I can't let one bad day, one strange experience drive me away from the work I know. But I'm more careful. I watch the sky. I watch the water. I pay attention to my instruments, and when they start acting strange, I don't ignore it. I don't try to push through. I turn around. I go home, because the ocean is deep. Deeper than most people realize. And in that depth, in those dark places where the pressure would crush us instantly, things exist. Things that occasionally rise. Things that move through the shallower waters where we fish and leave traces of their passage. Soft fish, dead batteries, missing time, darkness that absorbs light, sounds that make your teeth ache and your soul want to flee. These are the signs. These are the warnings. And if you're smart, you listen. I listened, I left, I survived. But sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed. If I'd waited there in the fog, engine dead, watching that dark water. Would something have surfaced? Would I have seen what was beneath me, circling, investigating, deciding? Part of me wants to know. Part of me will always want to know. But a bigger part, the part that likes being alive, the part that wants to see my sister in Seattle and eat my neighbor's egg salad sandwiches and watch TV on my couch, that part is glad I don't. The ocean keeps its secrets. And some secrets are meant to stay kept. I learned that on October 17th, 3 years ago, the day I don't fully remember. The day I wrote in my logbook, "Don't go back there." I haven't, I won't. Whatever's waiting in that spot, in those specific coordinates I've marked to avoid, it can wait without me. I'm staying in the shallower waters, the safer waters. The waters where fish feel solid and engines stay running and the darkness is just the absence of light, nothing more. That's enough for me. That's all I need. The ocean can keep the rest. The Greeks' Bay processing plant closed down in 2018. Environmental violations, from what I heard. Something about runoff contaminating the watershed. I never paid much attention to the details. By the time it shut down, I'd already been fishing independently for 6 years, selling my catch to buyers in Bellingham and occasionally down in Seattle when the price was better. The plant sat empty after that. Big concrete building right on the water. Rusting equipment visible through broken windows. No trespassing signs that nobody enforced. It became part of the landscape, just another abandoned structure along a coastline full of them. Mills that shut down. Canneries that went bankrupt. Fish processing facilities that couldn't compete with larger operations. I'd pass it sometimes on my way out of the bay, Never thought much about it. Just another piece of coastal decay, slowly being reclaimed by salt air and weather. My name is Miles. I'm 37. I've been fishing the waters around Whatcom County for 12 years now, ever since I dropped out of community college and decided I'd rather work with my hands than sit in a classroom. Some people thought I was making a mistake. My parents definitely did, but I never regretted it. The work is hard, but it's honest. You know exactly what you've accomplished at the end of each day. I run a 24-foot aluminum fishing boat. Not fancy, but it's paid for, and it's reliable. I named it the Wanderer, which my ex-girlfriend said was pretentious, but I like the sound of it. The boat handles well in rough water, and the engine's never given me serious trouble. That's all that matters. It was late January when things started. Dead of winter, which is usually slow for fishing, but I'd heard reports of good lingcod action near the old processing plant. A guy I know named Curtis had pulled up some nice fish there the week before. He gave me the general coordinates, told me it was worth checking out. I went out on a Tuesday. Cold morning, temperature maybe 35 degrees, wind light but steady from the northwest. The sky was that particular shade of gray that means it might rain or might not, impossible to tell. I'd dressed warm, layers under my rain gear, good boots, wool cap pulled down over my ears. The run from the marina to the plant took about 40 minutes. The water was choppy, but nothing my boat couldn't handle. I passed a couple of other fishing boats heading in different directions. We exchanged nods over the radio, the brief acknowledgement that passes between people doing the same work in the same conditions. The old plant looked worse up close than it did from a distance. The paint had peeled away in long strips. Windows were broken out completely. Part of the roof had collapsed on the south side. There was a dock extending out into the water. Wooden pilings green with algae, the decking rotted through in places. A chain-link fence surrounded the property, but sections of it had fallen or been cut away. I anchored about 200 yards offshore, in maybe 80 feet of water. Curtis had said the fish were concentrated around the old discharge pipes, where the plant used to pump its wastewater into the bay. Something about the structure providing habitat, attracting bait fish, creating a mini ecosystem, made sense. Fish don't care if a reef is natural or man-made. I rigged up my rod with a large jig, something with enough weight to get down quickly in the current. Lingcod aren't subtle fish. They like big presentations. I cast out toward where I estimated the pipes would be, let the jig sink, started working it back with sharp jerks of the rod tip. Third cast, I hooked something. Good weight, solid pull. Lingcod fight hard, but they're not complicated. They dive, you horse them back up. This one felt about right. I worked it carefully, not wanting to lose it. When it broke the surface, I could see it was a decent fish. Maybe 12 pounds, good eating size. I gaffed it, brought it aboard, dispatched it quickly with my priest. The club I keep for killing fish, weighted piece of hardwood. One good hit behind the eyes and it's over. I dropped the lingcod into my fish box, rebaited, cast again. Over the next 2 hours, I caught 7 more lingcod and 3 rockfish. All good size, all healthy looking. Curtis had been right about this spot. I was thinking I might come back regularly, maybe keep it quiet, not mention it to too many people. Good spots are hard to find and easy to lose once word gets out. I was reeling in my 8th lingcod when I noticed something floating near the boat. At first, I thought it was a piece of driftwood or a clump of kelp, but as it drifted closer I could see it was neither. It was some kind of container. Plastic, cylindrical, maybe 18 inches long and 6 inches in diameter. Dark blue or black, hard to tell in the flat light. I have a long-handled net I use for landing fish that are too big to gaff easily. I grabbed it and scooped up the container. It was lighter than I expected. sealed on both ends with what looked like rubber caps, no labels, no markings that I could see, just smooth plastic with a slight texture to it. I set it on the deck and looked at it for a minute. Could be anything. Could be garbage. Could be something someone dropped overboard by accident. The bay is full of debris. You pull up all kinds of trash when you're fishing. Bottles, cans, fishing line, pieces of rope. This was just another piece of human waste floating in the ocean. But something about it bothered me. The way it was sealed. The material it was made from. It didn't look old or weathered. It looked new, recent. Like it had been in the water for days, not months or years. I picked it up again, turned it over. One end had what looked like a small valve or port, covered by a threaded cap. Like something designed to be opened and closed repeatedly. The other end was smooth, featureless, except for a slight indentation in the center. I should have thrown it back. That's what I tell myself now. Should have just tossed it overboard and kept fishing. But I was curious. And curiosity is hard to ignore when you're out on the water alone with nothing but time. I tried to unscrew one of the end caps. It was tight, really tight, but after working at it for a minute, it started to move. I got it off and looked inside. The container was filled with liquid, clear, slightly viscous. No smell that I could detect. I poured a little onto the deck. It spread slowly, thicker than water, leaving a faint residue behind. Inside the container, suspended in the liquid, was something small. I couldn't see what exactly. I tipped the container carefully, trying to get a better look without spilling more of the liquid. Something dark moved inside, drifting through the viscous fluid. I got my flashlight from the cabin, shined it into the container. What I saw made my stomach go cold. It was an eye, a human eye, or something very much like one. Floating in the preservative liquid, optic nerves still attached, trailing behind it like a pale tail. The iris was gray-blue. The pupil was dilated, completely round, staring at nothing. I dropped the container. It hit the deck and rolled, more of that liquid spilling out. The eye sliding partially free. I stepped back, hit the gunnel, nearly went over. My heart was hammering. My breath came in short gasps. An eye, a human eye, in a sealed container, floating in the water near an abandoned processing plant. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, just staring at it rolling slightly with the boat's movement. That liquid spreading across the deck, the eye visible through the open end of the container. Then my training kicked in. The basic human response to finding evidence of something wrong. I needed to call the police or the Coast Guard. Somebody official. This wasn't trash. This was evidence. Evidence of what, I didn't know, but definitely something illegal. You don't just throw human body parts into the ocean in sealed containers for innocent reasons. I grabbed my radio, started to make the call. Then I stopped, because if I called it in, there would be questions. There would be an investigation. The Coast Guard would come out. Probably the Sheriff's Department, too. They'd want to know exactly where I found it. They'd search the area. And if they found more containers, more evidence, this spot would be closed off, marked as a crime scene. I wouldn't be able to fish here anymore. That thought made me feel sick. That my first concern was losing access to a fishing spot, not the fact that someone had apparently dismembered a body and dumped pieces of it in the bay. What kind of person thinks like that? But I did think it. Can't pretend otherwise. The thought was there, clear and immediate. This is a good spot. I don't want to lose it. I made myself pick up the radio again. Started to call. Then I saw another container floating about 30 feet off the port side. Same size, same color, drifting slowly past the boat. And beyond it, I could see more. Dark shapes bobbing on the surface, scattered across maybe 100-yard area. Dozens of them, maybe more. all identical to the one on my deck. My hand holding the radio started shaking. I set it down carefully, like it might break. Went to the side of the boat, counted the containers I could see, lost count at 20. There were more further out, harder to spot in the gray water under the gray sky. Someone had dumped a lot of containers here, a lot of... I couldn't let myself finish that thought. Couldn't let myself imagine what was inside all of those sealed plastic cylinders floating in the bay near the abandoned processing plant. I needed to leave. That much was clear. I needed to pull up my anchor and get out of here and call the authorities from somewhere else. Let them deal with it. This was beyond me. This was something for police and investigators and people trained to handle evidence of serious crimes. But I didn't move, just stood there watching those containers drift. Watching more of them appear as my eyes adjusted, as I learned to pick out their dark shapes against the darker water. There were so many, so many. One floated close enough to the boat that I could reach it with my net. I didn't want to, wanted to fire up the engine and leave and never come back. But my hand reached out anyway, scooped up the container, brought it aboard. This one was heavier, fuller. I set it next to the first one, compared them. Identical construction. Same seals, same valve port on one end. I didn't open it, didn't want to see what was inside, but I could feel the weight distribution, could tell it contained something solid suspended in liquid. A third container bumped against the hull. The current was bringing them to me, or the boat was drifting into them. Either way, they kept coming. I used the net to push them away, but more appeared. The surface around the Wanderer was thick with them now, dozens visible, maybe hundreds total in the area. How long had they been here? Days, weeks? The containers looked new, the seals intact. This was recent. Someone had done this recently. Dumped what might be pieces of one or more human bodies into the bay near an abandoned building where nobody came anymore. The abandoned building. I looked at it, really looked at it for the first time. The broken windows, the collapsed roof, the chain-link fence with holes cut in it. The loading dock with trucks would have backed up to receive shipments. The place had been empty for years, officially. But that didn't mean it was truly abandoned, didn't mean people hadn't found uses for it. Squatters, drug operations, or something worse. Something that required a large space away from witnesses, with water access, with no one around to ask questions. I needed to call this in. No more hesitation. This was evidence of something terrible and I needed to report it immediately. I reached for the radio again. That's when I saw the person on the dock, just standing there watching me. I don't know how long they'd been there. Could have been the whole time, standing in shadow, and I just hadn't noticed. But I noticed now. A figure in dark clothing, absolutely motionless, facing toward my boat. The distance was too far to make out details, maybe 200 yards from my boat to the dock. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, couldn't see their face. Just a dark shape against the darker backdrop of the building. They didn't move, didn't wave, didn't do anything, just stood there, watching. I felt my skin go cold, every instinct screaming at me to leave, to pull up anchor right now, start the engine, get out of this bay as fast as the Wanderer could go. But I couldn't pull up anchor with someone watching, couldn't take my eyes off that figure to work the winch. So we stood there, me on my boat, them on the dock, both of us motionless, both of us waiting. Then they moved, started walking along the dock toward the shore. Not running, just walking, casual, like they had all the time in the world. They reached the end of the dock, stepped onto dry land, disappeared behind the building. I didn't wait to see if they'd reappear. Hit the quick release on my anchor line, letting it all drop. $100 worth of anchor and rope gone, but I didn't care. Started the engine, threw it into gear, pointed the bow toward open water. The Wanderer's engine is reliable but not powerful. It took forever to build speed. I kept looking back at the plant, expecting to see a boat launching coming after me. But nothing appeared. The loading dock stayed empty. The building stayed silent. I made it out of the bay into the main channel. Only then did I let myself breathe. Only then did I reach for the radio and make the call I should have made 15 minutes earlier. The Coast Guard answered immediately. I gave them my position, told them I'd found what appeared to be human remains, multiple containers, possible crime scene near the old Greeks Bay processing plant. The operator's voice stayed calm, professional, asked me to stay in the area if it was safe. Help was on the way. I didn't stay, told them I felt threatened, that I'd seen someone on shore who might have been watching me. That was enough. The operator didn't argue. Told me to proceed to the nearest marina and wait for authorities there. I made it back to my home marina in 30 minutes. Pushed the engine harder than I probably should have. The whole trip, I kept expecting to see another boat behind me. Kept checking my mirrors, my radar, looking for any sign of pursuit. Nothing. Just empty water and gray sky. There were 2 sheriff's deputies waiting when I docked. Took my statement. Asked detailed questions about what I'd found, where exactly, how many containers, what I'd seen on the dock. I told them everything. Gave them the coordinates. Described the figure I'd seen, though I couldn't provide much detail. They took the 2 containers I'd pulled aboard, handled them carefully, with gloves, sealed them in evidence bags, asked if I'd touched the contents. I said yes, I'd opened one, seen what was inside. They made notes, asked how I felt. If I needed medical attention, I said no, I was fine, I just wanted to go home. They said the Coast Guard and additional law enforcement would be searching the area, that I'd probably be contacted again for follow-up questions, that I shouldn't discuss the case with anyone, standard procedure for an ongoing investigation. I went home, stood in my shower for a long time, water as hot as I could stand it, trying to wash away the feeling of that day, the image of that eye floating in preservative, the figure on the dock, the dozens of containers bobbing in the bay. The news reported it the next day. Human remains found in Greeks Bay, investigation ongoing. They didn't give details, didn't say how many containers or what was in them, just that a fisherman had reported finding evidence and authorities were conducting a search. Over the next week, more information came out. Piecemeal, incomplete. The containers held various body parts, multiple individuals. The remains had been preserved in a chemical solution, professionally done. The processing plant was being treated as a crime scene, no arrests yet. I gave 2 more statements to detectives, went over the same details again and again. They showed me photos, asked if I recognized anyone. I didn't. They asked if I'd noticed anything else unusual in the area over the past months. I hadn't. I didn't fish that area regularly. This had been my first time based on Curtis's recommendation. Curtis was questioned too, I found out later. He'd fished there the week before, hadn't seen anything unusual. Just good lingcod action. He was lucky. Or I was unlucky. Depends on how you look at it. The investigation dragged on. Weeks turned into months. The news coverage faded. Other stories took over. But the case stayed open. I'd check online periodically, looking for updates. There were never many. Police were following leads. Anyone with information should come forward. The usual language of an investigation that wasn't producing results. I didn't go back to Greeks Bay. Didn't fish anywhere near it. There's thousands of miles of coastline, hundreds of good spots. I didn't need that one. Didn't want it anymore. The lingcod could have it. But I thought about it, couldn't help thinking about it. Who had done this? How many victims were there? How long had the plant been used for this purpose? And who was the person on the dock? Someone involved, obviously. Someone who'd been there doing God knows what when I happened to drift into their disposal site. They'd seen me, seen my boat. I'd filed a report with the harbor master. My boat was registered. If someone wanted to find me, they could. That thought kept me up at night for a long time. Every car that drove past my house, every unfamiliar face at the marina, made me tense. Nothing happened, though. Weeks passed, then months. No threats, no confrontations. Whoever had been on that dock either didn't care about one fisherman who'd stumbled onto their secret, or they disappeared after the authorities showed up. Either way, I was apparently not worth the risk. 6 months later, there was an arrest. Not local. Someone in Oregon connected to a network of people involved in illegal organ harvesting. The Greeks Bay plant had been one of several sites used for disposing of remains after organs were removed and sold. The investigation was ongoing. More arrests expected. I read the articles, tried to feel relieved that they'd caught someone, but mostly I just felt numb. Those containers floating in the bay, those pieces of people reduced to medical waste. It was too big, too horrible to process properly. I still fish these waters, still go out most days when weather permits. But I'm more careful now about what I pull out of the ocean. More careful about what I investigate when I see something floating that shouldn't be there. And I never go near abandoned buildings on the waterline. Never fish too close to places where people once worked but don't anymore. Because those empty spaces attract things. Attract people who need privacy for activities they can't conduct in the light. The ocean is big. It's easy to think you can hide things in it, that you can dump evidence and the current will carry it away, scatter it, bury it in silt and sand where it'll never be found. And mostly, that's true. The ocean keeps secrets, holds on to things we throw into it and doesn't give them back. But sometimes the current shifts. Sometimes the tide brings things up instead of pulling them down. Sometimes a fisherman anchors in exactly the wrong spot at exactly the wrong time and finds what wasn't meant to be found. I was that fisherman. I found those containers. And because of that, some family somewhere might have gotten answers about what happened to someone they loved. Might have gotten closure, or at least confirmation. That's what I tell myself when I can't sleep. When I'm lying in bed thinking about that eye staring at nothing. About those dozens of containers bobbing in gray water under gray sky. I tell myself that finding them mattered, that reporting it was the right thing to do, even though part of me wanted to ignore it and keep fishing my good spot. I did the right thing, I know that intellectually, but it doesn't make the memories easier, doesn't make me feel better about what I saw. The Wanderer sits at the dock, engine maintained, hull clean, gear organized. Ready for the next trip. I'll go out tomorrow if the weather holds. Check my usual spots. Pull up fish and sell them and come home. Normal day, normal work. But there's a part of me that stays in that bay. Stays anchored near that abandoned plant with containers floating all around. Figure on the dock watching, waiting to see what I'll do. That part of me never left. Never will. The ocean gave me a glimpse of what it holds, what people hide in its depths. And once you've seen that, once you know what's down there in the dark water, you can't unsee it. You just keep fishing, keep working, keep living your life. But you remember. You always remember, and you're more careful about where you drop your anchor. Because you never know what might be floating nearby, just beneath the surface, waiting to drift up and reveal itself. The ocean keeps its secrets until it doesn't. And when it decides to show you something, you can't look away. You can't pretend you didn't see. You can only report it, deal with the aftermath, and try to move on. I'm still moving on, still trying. Most days I'm fine. Most days I can be on the water and just focus on the work. But some days when the water is flat and gray, and the sky presses down and I'm alone with nothing but the sound of the engine and the lap of waves, I remember those containers. That figure on the dock. And I wonder how many other secrets are floating out there. How many other abandoned places along this coastline are being used for things we'd rather not know about. How many other fishermen have pulled up things they wish they hadn't and made the choice to look away, to stay silent, to keep their good fishing spots. I didn't make that choice. I called it in. I did the right thing, but there's a cost to doing the right thing sometimes. A cost in sleep lost and peace of mind sacrificed, and the simple pleasure of being alone on the water forever changed. That's the cost. I'm still paying it, and I'll probably keep paying it for the rest of my life. Every time I go out, every time I drop a line, every time I see something floating that I can't quite identify. The ocean is deep and wide and full of things we don't understand. Most of them are natural, products of evolution and adaptation, and the strange physics of a world underwater. But some of them are human, products of our worst impulses, our darkest needs, our ability to do terrible things when we think no one is watching. I saw evidence of that darkness, pulled it aboard my boat, held it in my hands. And now I carry that knowledge with me everywhere I go. The wanderer is ready. The tide is right. The weather looks good. Time to head out again. Time to drop lines and hope for fish and try not to think about what else might be down there. Time to keep fishing. Keep working. Keep living. Because what else can you do? The ocean doesn't stop. The tides don't stop. Life doesn't stop just because you've seen something that changed you. You just adapt. You adjust. You keep going. And you remember. Always remember. Because forgetting would be worse. Forgetting would mean those people in those containers died for nothing, were disposed of like trash and forgotten completely. At least this way someone remembers. Someone knows. Someone carries that knowledge and refuses to let it go. That someone is me. And I'll carry it as long as I fish these waters. As long as I'm alive. It's the least I can do. The very least. The engine starts on the first try. The GPS powers up. The radio crackles to life. Everything works. Everything's ready. Time to go. Time to fish. Time to face the water one more time and see what it decides to show me today. I cast off the lines, pull away from the dock, point the bow toward open water, and I go. Because that's what fishermen do. We go out, we work, we come back, again and again, until we can't anymore, until the ocean finally takes us instead of just showing us its secrets, until we become part of those depths we spend our lives floating above, until we're the ones being pulled up by someone else, decades from now, unrecognizable, reduced to evidence of something that happened in a time before they were born. Part of the ocean's endless cycle, part of its permanent record. Just another secret waiting to be found. I keep my fishing journal in a waterproof notebook. Black cover, spiral bound, fits in my jacket pocket. I've gone through maybe 15 of them over the years. When one fills up, I start another. Nothing fancy. Just date, location, species caught, weather notes. Sometimes a sketch if I see something interesting. A bird I don't recognize. An unusual fish pattern. Cloud formations that catch my eye. The current notebook has been with me for 8 months. I'm about 2/3 through it. When I'm done with my day and back at the dock, I'll flip through sometimes, looking at where I've been, what I caught, how conditions changed week to week. It's useful for planning, helps me remember which spots produce in which seasons. There's an entry from April that I look at more than the others. April 22nd. I didn't write much that day. Just, south of Protection Island, 7 rockfish, 2 lingcod. Calm seas, don't use that net again. That last part, that's what I keep coming back to. Don't use that net again, I underlined it twice, but I don't remember writing it. Don't remember what happened to the net, or why I felt so strongly about not using it. The net isn't on my boat anymore. I checked. I have 2 other nets, both in good condition, but that particular one, the large landing net with the extendable handle, it's gone. I must have gotten rid of it, thrown it away, or donated it, or left it somewhere. But I can't remember doing it. My name is Grant, 41 years old. I've been fishing commercially out of Sequim for 9 years. Before that, I worked construction, did some logging, bounced between jobs that didn't stick. Fishing stuck. I like the independence, the solitude. No boss breathing down my neck, no coworkers I have to make small talk with. Just me and the water and the work. My boat is a 27-footer fiberglass hull, decent engine. Nothing special, but it gets the job done. I named her the Drifter, which seemed appropriate. I drift between spots, drift between seasons, drift through life without much of a plan beyond the next trip out. April 22nd was a Wednesday. I remember that much. I'd planned to fish closer to shore, maybe work the kelp beds near Diamond Point, but the forecast was so good I decided to go further out. Calm seas, light wind, visibility excellent. Days like that are rare in spring. You take advantage when they come. I headed south from Sequim Bay around 5 in the morning. Still dark, but the sky was clear enough to see stars. The water was flat, barely a ripple. The engine sound seemed louder than usual in the stillness, echoing off the water like I was in an enclosed space instead of the open strait. I reached my chosen spot around 6:15, just as the sun was starting to come up. South of Protection Island, over a rocky bottom in about 120 feet of water. Good area for rockfish and lingcod. I'd fished it before with decent success. I set up my rods, baited hooks with cut herring, started the slow troll. The sunrise was spectacular. Orange and pink streaking across the sky, reflecting off that mirror-smooth water. The kind of morning that makes you understand why people romanticize this work. Most days aren't like that. Most days are cold and wet and miserable, but days like that one make you forget the bad ones. I caught my first rockfish within 20 minutes. Good size, maybe 3 pounds. Bright orange coloring, healthy looking. I landed it with my net, the large one with the extendable handle. Got the hook out, dropped the fish in my cooler, rebaited, cast again. Over the next 2 hours, I caught 6 more rockfish and 2 lingcod. Steady action, good quality fish. I was thinking it would be a profitable day. Thinking maybe I'd tell a couple of other fishermen I know about this spot, share the wealth a little. The water was so calm, the fishing so good, I felt generous. Around 8:30, I hooked something that felt different, heavier. The way it moved didn't feel like a fish. More resistance, but not the active fighting pull of something alive. More like I'd snagged something on the bottom. Debris, maybe, or kelp. I worked it up slowly, trying not to break my line. Whatever it was had significant weight. When it got close to the surface, I could see it wasn't kelp. It was some kind of fabric, dark, waterlogged, tangled on my hook. I used my net to bring it aboard. As I lifted it out of the water, I realized it was a jacket. Heavy canvas material, the kind commercial fishermen wear. Thoroughly soaked, covered in algae and small barnacles. It had been in the water for a while. I laid it on the deck, worked my hook free. The jacket was in surprisingly good condition considering how long it must have been submerged. The barnacles were small, newly attached. Maybe it had been on the bottom in deep water where things grow slowly, then recently shifted to shallower water. There was something in one of the pockets. I could feel the shape of it through the fabric. I almost didn't check. Almost just threw the whole jacket back overboard. But curiosity got the better of me. I reached into the pocket and pulled out a wallet. Leather, waterlogged, but intact. I opened it carefully. Inside was a driver's license in a plastic sleeve. The plastic had protected it from the worst of the water damage. I could still read the name and see the photo clearly. The face looking back at me from that license was familiar. Not someone I knew personally, but someone I'd seen before. It took me a moment to place where. Then I remembered. The bulletin board at the marina. Missing person flyer. This same face, this same name. A fisherman who'd gone out alone the previous fall and never came back. His boat had been found drifting empty about 10 miles offshore. No signs of struggle, no indication of what happened. Coast Guard conducted a search but never found a body. The assumption was he'd fallen overboard. Maybe had a medical emergency. Maybe just lost his balance in rough seas. It happens. People disappear from boats all the time. But here was his jacket. Here was his wallet. Not 10 miles offshore where his boat was found. Here, south of Protection Island. In water. I fished regularly. I sat on the deck holding that wallet for a long time. The sun was higher now, warming my back, but I felt cold. This jacket hadn't drifted here on currents. The barnacle growth, the location. It didn't make sense for something that had been in the water since last fall. This had been on the bottom, held down by something, and recently disturbed. I should have called it in immediately. Should have contacted the Coast Guard, reported finding evidence related to a missing person. But I didn't. I just sat there looking at that driver's license photo trying to understand. The man's name was David Ortega, age 37, from Port Townsend. I'd never met him, but I knew people who had. The fishing community around here is small. Everyone knows someone who knows someone. His disappearance had been talked about for weeks. His wife had offered a reward for information. Search parties had gone out, and here was part of him. Not his body, but his jacket, his wallet, things he would have been wearing when he went into the water. Found miles from where his boat was discovered, in an area that made no geographic sense. I put the wallet back in the jacket pocket, stood up, looked at the water around my boat. It was still that perfect mirror calm. The sun sparkled on the surface. Nothing looked different. Nothing looked wrong. But I felt watched, like something beneath the surface had eyes on me. I decided to make one more cast. Just one. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to see if I'd catch something else. Maybe I wanted proof that this was just a strange coincidence. Maybe I was in shock and not thinking clearly. I baited my hook, cast out, let it sink. Almost immediately I felt weight on the line. That same heavy, non-fighting resistance. I reeled it in slowly, knowing what I'd find before it broke the surface. Another piece of clothing. A boot this time. Heavy rubber work boot, the kind fishermen wear. Barnacles on it, but not many. Recent submersion, or recently moved from deeper water. I pulled it aboard with the net, checked inside. No foot, thank God. Just the boot. I cast again, caught another boot, the matching one. Then a pair of work gloves, then a knit cap, all showing the same pattern. Barnacle growth indicating they'd been underwater for months, but the locations didn't match where they should have drifted if they'd been lost last fall. I stopped fishing, started the engine. I needed to move away from this spot. but I couldn't make myself leave entirely. Instead, I motored in a slow circle, maybe 100-yard radius, looking at the water. The surface gave nothing away, just that flat calm reflecting the morning sky. But I kept thinking about what was underneath, about the bottom, 120 feet down, about what might be there that I couldn't see. I anchored again, about 50 yards from my original position. Got out my depth finder, turned it to maximum sensitivity, started watching the screen, looking for anything unusual. The bottom showed up clearly. Rocky substrate, some elevation changes, nothing remarkable. I drifted slowly, watching the sonar paint a picture of what was below. Then I saw it, a shape that didn't match the surrounding terrain. Too regular, too geometric. The sonar couldn't give me details, just showed an object maybe 8 feet long, raised slightly off the bottom. Could be a lot of things. A log, a piece of debris, natural rock formation. Or it could be a boat. A small boat, like the kind a solo fisherman would use. Sitting on the bottom in 120 feet of water, miles from where the Coast Guard had searched, in a location that made no sense based on currents and last known position, I marked the coordinates on my GPS, stared at them, thought about what to do. If I reported this, there would be an investigation. Divers would come down. They might find David Ortega's body still in that boat, or tangled nearby. They might find evidence of what happened to him, but they might also find something else, something that explained why his boat and his body ended up in completely different locations, something that suggested his disappearance wasn't an accident. I picked up my radio, put it down, picked it up again. I must have done that 5 or 6 times. Finally, I made the call, contacted the Coast Guard, reported finding personal effects belonging to a missing fisherman, gave them my coordinates, told them about the sonar contact. They took my information, said they'd send a response boat, asked me to remain on scene if possible. I said I would. Then I sat on my deck surrounded by David Ortega's waterlogged clothing and waited. The Coast Guard arrived about 40 minutes later. 2 officers in a rigid inflatable. They came aboard, took statements, photographed the items I'd recovered, asked detailed questions about where exactly I'd found each piece, what the sonar showed, whether I'd noticed anything else unusual. I told them everything, showed them the sonar image, marked my exact position when I'd hooked the jacket. They thanked me, said they'd be conducting a search of the area, said I was free to go but might be contacted for follow-up. I left, pulled up my anchor, started the engine, headed back toward Sequim Bay. The whole trip back, I kept looking over my shoulder, checking behind me. I don't know what I expected to see. Nothing was following me. The water was still flat and calm and empty. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. That by finding those items, by calling them in, I'd disturbed something that was meant to stay hidden. The Coast Guard found the boat 3 days later. It was David Ortega's, confirmed by the registration numbers. Sitting upright on the bottom, not capsized, not damaged, like someone had carefully lowered it there and just left it. David Ortega's body was inside, still belted into the captain's chair. Cause of death wasn't released to the public, but I heard from someone who knew one of the divers that there were no obvious injuries, no signs of trauma, just a man sitting in his boat at the bottom of the ocean, like he'd chosen to go down with it. The investigation concluded it was likely carbon monoxide poisoning. Engine running in an enclosed space, maybe the cabin ventilation was blocked. He lost consciousness, the boat eventually sank. Tragic accident. But that didn't explain the location, didn't explain why the boat was found miles from where it had been drifting empty when the Coast Guard located it. Didn't explain how it ended up on the bottom in that specific spot. I heard theories, currents that moved it before it sank, confusion about the original drift location, navigation errors in the initial search. Everyone had explanations that sounded reasonable if you didn't think about them too hard. But I thought about them, couldn't stop thinking about them, because I'd fished that area dozens of times and never snagged anything unusual. Never caught any clothing or personal effects. And then, one day in April, I pulled up almost everything David Ortega had been wearing. Like something had released them. Like they'd been held down and then let go. All at once. Right when I happened to be fishing that exact spot. The net. My large landing net with the extendable handle. I used it to pull those items aboard. Used it to scoop David Ortega's jacket and boots and gloves out of the water. And afterward, I got rid of it. Don't use that net again. That's what I wrote. I don't remember why. Don't remember what happened to make me feel so strongly that I needed to dispose of it. I know I must have. The net isn't on my boat. But the memory of actually throwing it away, or donating it, or whatever I did with it, that's gone. There's a blank space in my mind where that memory should be. The same way there's a blank space around the rest of that day. I remember pulling up the clothing. Remember calling the Coast Guard. Remember heading back to port. But the details are fuzzy. The timeline doesn't quite add up. My journal entry says I caught 7 rockfish and 2 lingcod, but I only remember landing the first few fish. Don't remember catching the rest. It's like something happened that my brain decided not to store properly, or decided to hide, protect me from. I don't know which. I stayed away from that area for months after. Fished different spots, different depths. Did fine. The business didn't suffer. But I thought about it constantly. Wondered what really happened to David Ortega. Wondered if the carbon monoxide theory was correct, or if it was just the easiest explanation. Wondered if I'd seen something that day that I wasn't remembering. Something that my subconscious decided was too disturbing to keep accessible. Something that made me write, "Don't use that net again," and then eliminate the net entirely from my boat. Eventually, I went back. Not to that exact spot, but nearby. Fished the general area. Everything was normal. Good catches. No unusual items, no strange feelings, just regular fishing in a regular spot. But I don't use landing nets anymore. Any of them. If I hook a fish too large to bring aboard by hand, I gaff it. Or I use a different method, but no nets. Can't bring myself to use them. Don't like the way they look sitting on the deck. Don't like reaching for them. Don't like the idea of scooping something out of the water that might not be a fish. Other fishermen have asked about it. Noticed I don't carry nets. Some have offered to give me their old ones. I always decline. Make up excuses. Say I prefer gaffs. Say nets tangle too easily. Say whatever comes to mind to avoid explaining the real reason. Because I don't know the real reason. Not completely. I just know that something happened on April 22nd that made me never want to use a landing net again. Something involving David Ortega's jacket and the other items I pulled from the water. Something that my brain has kindly decided not to let me remember in detail. Maybe that's a blessing. Maybe there are things we're better off not knowing. Things our minds protect us from because full knowledge would be too much to carry. Or maybe I'm just refusing to look at something obvious. Refusing to examine my own memories too closely because I'm afraid of what I'll find. Afraid of what I might remember if I push hard enough. The journal entry is still there. I haven't torn it out or tried to erase it. It's part of the record, part of the sequence of days and trips and catches that make up my fishing life. April 22nd happened. I was there. I pulled up David Ortega's things and called them in and helped close a missing person case. That should feel good. Should feel like I did the right thing. And part of me does feel that way. But another part, the part that got rid of the net and wrote that warning to myself, that part knows something else, knows there's more to the story, More that happened in those fuzzy hours I can't quite recall. I still fish these waters, still go out most days when weather permits. The drifter is reliable. My equipment works. I make a living pulling food from the ocean, normal life, normal work. But I check my journal more often now, read through entries looking for gaps, looking for other warnings I might have written to myself and then forgotten. So far, April 22nd is the only one. Just that single entry with its cryptic final line. Don't use that net again. Simple instruction. Clear meaning. But the reason behind it, that stays hidden, locked away somewhere in my memory where I can't access it. Or won't access it. Hard to say which. The ocean keeps its secrets, and apparently so do I. Keep them even from myself. Hide things in the depths of my own mind the way the ocean hides things in its depths. Maybe that's appropriate. Maybe people who work on the water long enough start to mirror it. Start to operate by the same rules. Show some things, hide others. Give up information reluctantly and only under the right conditions. David Ortega's family got closure. They were able to bury him. That matters. That's the important thing. One family's anguish ended because I happened to fish the right spot on the right day and pulled up the evidence that led to finding him. But I wonder sometimes if I paid a price for that. If finding what I found cost me something. Cost me my memory of that day, my comfort with using certain equipment, my peace of mind when fishing certain areas. Maybe that's just trauma, the mind's way of protecting itself from disturbing experiences. I've never talked to a therapist about it. Haven't mentioned it to anyone except the Coast Guard in my official statement. This is the kind of thing you keep to yourself in this community. Nobody wants to hear about your psychological struggles with a routine finding of evidence. So I carry it alone. Carry the memory I have and the memory I don't have. The knowledge that something happened and the lack of knowledge about what exactly that something was. It's a strange weight, not heavy exactly, but constant, always there in the background. I've thought about going back to that exact spot, anchoring right over where the boat was found and sitting there, seeing if the location triggers anything, seeing if being there again would unlock whatever my brain has hidden away. But I haven't done it. Probably never will. Some doors are better left closed. Some memories are better left buried. The ocean taught me that. It holds countless stories in its depths, countless secrets. Most of them stay hidden forever. Maybe mine should too. The drifter needs maintenance. Engine's running a little rough. I'll take care of it tomorrow. Then back out on the water. Back to the work. Back to the routine that keeps me sane and grounded and moving forward. Forward is the only direction that makes sense. Can't go back. Can't recover what's lost or hidden or forgotten. Can only keep moving, keep fishing, keep living, keep filling up journals with entries that record where I've been and what I've caught and occasionally what I've decided not to do again without fully remembering why. That's enough? It has to be. Because the alternative is diving deep into memories that my mind has clearly decided are better left in the dark. And I've learned from the ocean. I've learned that the dark depths hold things we're not meant to see. Things that change us if we look at them too closely. Things that might be better left alone. So I leave them alone. I fish the shallower waters. I stick to what I can handle. And I trust that whatever happened on April 22nd, whatever made me write those words in my journal, my subconscious handled it the best way it could, by letting me forget, by protecting me from full knowledge, by hiding the details in a dark place where they can't hurt me anymore. That's what I tell myself anyway. Most days, I believe it. Most days, it's enough. And on the days when it's not, when I catch myself reaching for a net that isn't there anymore, when I find myself avoiding certain coordinates without knowing why, On those days, I just work through it, push past it, trust that my instincts know better than my conscious mind what I can handle and what I can't. The ocean taught me that too. Sometimes you don't need to understand everything. Sometimes you just need to respect the boundaries, honor the warnings, and trust that there are reasons, good reasons, for staying away from certain depths. I'm staying away. The net is gone. April 22nd is behind me. David Ortega's family has their answers, and I have mine, incomplete as they are. That's how it is. That's how it'll stay. And I'm fine with that, or I'm learning to be, which amounts to the same thing in the end. The water waits, it always waits. Tomorrow I'll go back out. Tomorrow I'll fish and work and live. And I'll do it without a landing net, without full memory of why that matters. But knowing, somehow, that it does. That has to be enough. It is enough. It will be enough.